The universe does not end in a wall of fire or a frozen, lightless void. It frays at the edges. It thins, like old cloth worn transparent. And in those threadbare patches of reality, there is a place. It has no name on any star chart, for it is not a place of matter or energy, but of potential and echo. It is the forgotten silence between worlds, where the veil trembles like a held breath, and all the lost things, a child's wish, a soldier's last prayer, the resonance of a supernova, drift in currents of pure possibility. And here, in this placeless place, a single name rides the restless wind, Nerah. She did not arrive, for she was already there. She did not form, for she was never truly dispersed. She coalesced, a gathering of thoughts scattered across the aether. Around her, a soft spectral mist congealed, half shadow, half starlight. It clung to an almost human shape, swirling at the edges of long limbs and a straight spine, like smoke hinting at its fire. The mist was not cold, like the fog of a mortal world, nor warm. It felt of ozone and petrichor, the scent of a storm that has just broken, and the lingering electricity that crackles in its wake. Ethereal enough to be mistaken for a trick of the light, yet she exuded a density, a sheer will, as fierce and solid as mountain granite. Sculpted from the remnants of storms, she embodied the quiet fury of a hurricane's eye and the explosive release of a lightning strike. Her face, settling from the vapor, etched ancient sorrows. High cheekbones carved from moonlight, a jawline that spoke of defiance, and a mouth that had forgotten the shape of a smile. Her eyes, however, held her truth. They were not orbs of flesh and fluid, but twin pools of captured nebula, glowing with a soft internal luminescence. Within their depths, a quiet, persistent ache spoke of one who had wandered too long, seen civilizations rise from dust and return to it, and forgotten the sound of her own mortal name. Yet, for all their weariness, they were not dead. They were watchful, alert, forever turned towards the trembling veil, listening. Always listening for destiny's call, a summons she had awaited for an age. For she was Nerah, the last of her kind. She was a Wraithwind. The legend, if any remained to tell it, echoed as a lament on stormy nights. It spoke of a time when the world of men and the world of spirits were not so starkly divided. A mortal woman, a warrior of a tribe that read its future in the patterns of thunderheads, fell in love not with a man, but with the storm itself. In a ritual of impossible primal power, she gave her soul to the gale, and from that union a child was born, not of flesh, but of wind and will, soul and sky, a Wraithwind. It was a curse. It was a blessing. Nerah was bound to no single plane of existence. With a thought, she could dissolve the bonds of her form, becoming that whispering spectral fog, an unseen current of air that could slip through the cracks in reality, flowing through the space between seconds. She could become the chill on a man's spine, the rustle of leaves where there was no breeze, the half-heard whisper on the edge of hearing. In this form, she was untouchable, unknowable. But she could also cohere, drawing power from the atmospheric energy around her, her feet finding purchase on paths that did not exist for mortal men. She could stride between the realms, her form solidifying into a warrior of mist and starlight, her strength that of the gale, her speed that of the lightning. She walked the unseen paths, the ghost roads that connected what is to what was and what might be. And on these paths, she hunted. She preyed on secrets, relentlessly tracking the whispers and echoes of a cataclysm that shattered her life, stole her people and her world, leaving her the sole lingering testament to their existence. The wind that was her breath and her blood carried more than her name. It sang a library of sorrows. Tonight, it carried a sharp, dissonant chord. It carried the echoes of battles long buried, the faint metallic scent of spilled blood and spent energy cells, rising like a phantom from the soil of a world she had not visited in centuries. A place called Rockton. A place of deep woods, ancient stones, and sleeping memories. Then, a deeper, more disturbing sensation pierced through the echoes. A low thrum vibrated on the edge of her perception, resonating not with sound or light, but with absence. It was a silence that screamed, a void that hungered. Danger returned, a hunger older than any kingdom, a patient cosmic predator stirred once more from its deep slumber. Nerah, storm-sculpted ghost and last Wraithwind, turned her starlit eyes towards the trembling veil. Destiny didn't just call, it screamed her name. Part 1. The Concrete and the Ethereal. Chapter 1. Static on the Line. Sergeant Elias Thorne tasted rust and regret. The rust was from the canteen he'd forgotten to clean properly, the water within tinged with the metallic tang of oxidation. The regret was fresher, sharper. Regret that he'd re-upped his contract. Regret that he hadn't taken that cushy corporate security job his brother, Aris, had lined up for him. Most of all, regret that he'd let Command talk him into leading another tour with the 7th Pathfinders Regiment, Special Operations Division. "Anything on the scope, Corporal?" Elias spoke into his throat mic, his voice a low gravel that was absorbed by the oppressive humidity of the forest. "Negative, Sergeant," came the reply from Specialist Ava Rostova, his comms and tech expert. Her voice was a clipped, professional whisper over the encrypted channel. Still just a dead zone. No EM, no thermal, no biosignatures bigger than a squirrel. It's like a 10-click circle of this forest just turned off. Elias shifted the weight of his XR-90 variable rifle on its mag harness. The air here, deep within the Rockton State Forest, was thick enough to chew. Ancient oaks and pines formed a dense canopy that plunged the forest floor into a perpetual twilight, even at midday. Moss, thick as a winter blanket, covered everything: rocks, fallen logs, the northern faces of trees, glowing with a faint, sickly green phosphorescence that did little to cut the gloom. This was supposed to be a milk run, a search and rescue for a missing geological survey team. 4 civilians from GeoCorp, amateurs, probably got themselves turned around, panicked, and shut off their comms to save battery. Standard procedure. Except nothing about this felt standard. The silence was the first thing that had set his teeth on edge. Not the quiet of a deep forest, which was always alive with the hum of insects, the chatter of birds, the rustle of unseen creatures. This was an absolute, profound silence. The kind of auditory vacuum you get in a soundproofed room, or the moments after a nearby explosion has deafened you. His team of 4 Pathfinders, Rostova, their heavy weapons guy Corporal Ben Carter, and their medic, Private First Class Jen Sato, had all commented on it. They moved with the practiced stealth of their trade, their armored boots making almost no sound on the damp loam, but in this oppressive quiet, every tiny crackle of a twig underfoot sounded like a gunshot. "Last known position was 200 meters ahead, by the old standing stones," Elias murmured, his eyes scanning the impenetrable walls of vegetation. "Fan out, 5-meter spread, keep your eyes up." They moved forward, a diamond formation cutting through the gloom. Elias was at the point, his senses on high alert. He'd served 2 tours on Mars, fighting insurrectionists in the red dust canyons of the Valles Marineris. He'd done a 6-month stint in the Jovian exclusion zone, hunting down corporate pirates in the metallic hydrogen seas of Jupiter's lower atmosphere. He knew what combat felt like. He knew the electric tension before a firefight, the smell of plasma discharge, the gut-wrenching lurch of a dropship under fire. This was different. This felt wrong. The air itself seemed to watch them, heavy and ancient. Carter, a mountain of a man whose exo-assisted heavy armor made him look more like a small vehicle than a soldier, grunted. "Sarge, I got something." Elias froze, his rifle snapping up. "Talk to me, Ben." Thermal's still dead, but my motion tracker, it's getting squirrely. Pinging something big, intermittent, dead ahead, right where the stones should be. Intermittent how? Rostova cut in, her voice tight. Like it's there, then it's not, phasing in and out of the sensor's refresh cycle. Could be an equipment malfunction, Sato offered, his voice calm, as a medic should be. This atmospheric pressure is weird, could be affecting the delicate bits. Could be, Elias conceded, though he didn't believe it. He trusted his gear, but he trusted the code knot in his stomach more. All right, we approach slow. Sato, you're on my 6. Rostova, cover our flank. Carter, find some high ground, if you can call any of this crap high ground, and get that rotary cannon ready to sing. Go on, Whispercom. The clicks of acknowledgement were the only sounds. They crept forward, the world shrinking to the scope of Elias's helmet-integrated display. His HUD flickered with useless data streams, barometric pressure dropping, humidity at 98%, EM field flatlining. It was a ghost signal, a big fat nothing where there should be something. They crested a small moss-covered ridge and saw it. The clearing. And in the center of the clearing, the standing stones. They were massive, jagged monoliths of dark veined rock, arranged in a rough circle. Local legends said they were older than any recorded history, placed there by forgotten hands for a forgotten purpose. They looked less like a human construction and more like the forest had grown teeth. And scattered amongst the stones were the remains of the GeoCorp survey team. Sato swore softly, a sharp hiss of breath. Gods above. It wasn't a massacre. It was an art installation. The 4 bodies were positioned carefully, almost reverently. One was seated at the base of a monolith, head tilted back as if stargazing, his mouth open in a silent scream. Another was kneeling, hands clasped as if in prayer. 2 others were laid out side by side, their arms linked. There was no blood, no visible wounds. Their skin was pale, waxy, and their eyes were wide open, but they were milky white, like boiled eggs. Rostova, scan them, Elias ordered, his voice dangerously low. Full spectrum. I want to know what did this. Scanning. Sergeant, this is impossible. No cellular decay, no rigor mortis. Vitals are flat, of course, but their body temperature is ambient, 21 degrees Celsius, same as the air. It's like they were flash frozen, but without the ice. Elias moved forward cautiously, his rifle sweeping the silent perimeter. The air in the clearing was even colder and carried a faint, acrid smell, like burnt sugar and static electricity. And their gear? Wiped clean. The data drives on their tablets are completely corrupted, not just erased, but a cascade of bit rot. It's like every piece of information just dissolved. Their comms units are fused to lumps of plastic. Something did this, Carter's voice rumbled over the comm, and it's still here. My tracker is going ballistic. It's everywhere now, all around us. Elias felt it too. A pressure in his ears, a tingling sensation on his skin. The little hairs on the back of his neck stood up. He looked at the bodies again. They weren't just dead. They were empty. That was the only word for it. Like husks. Like whatever they had been. Their memories, their thoughts, their souls had been neatly scooped out, leaving the empty shell behind. He looked up at the canopy. The perpetual twilight seemed to darken. The phosphorescent moss on the trees pulsed with a slow, hypnotic rhythm. And in the oppressive silence, a new sound began to emerge. It wasn't a sound his ears could hear, but one he felt in the bones of his skull. A low, pervasive hum, the kind you get from a high-voltage power line. It grew in intensity, a carrier wave for something else. A whisper. No, not a whisper. Thousands of them. A torrent of overlapping, sibilant voices, speaking in no language he knew, yet he could feel the meaning behind them. Hunger. Emptiness. A promise of silence. Static. That's what his mind named it. A wall of white noise that was trying to overwrite the world. "Fall back," Elias roared, the command breaking the spell. "Fall back to the ridge, now!" As his team scrambled back, Elias saw it. For a fraction of a second, the air between the standing stones shimmered, like heat haze off asphalt. But it wasn't heat. It was a distortion, a patch of the world that didn't quite fit. It bent the light around it, twisting the image of the trees behind it into an impossible spiral. And in that shimmer, he saw shapes. Writhing, indistinct forms that had too many joints and moved with a horrifying liquid grace. Then it was gone. The air was clear. The humming stopped. But the silence that returned was heavier, more malevolent than before. From his position on the ridge, Carter let out a strangled cry. "Sarge, look!" Elias followed his gaze. One of the bodies, the one who looked like he was stargazing, was moving. Its head slowly, mechanically swiveled down until its milky white eyes were looking directly at them. Its jaw worked, and a sound came from its throat, a dry, rasping noise like stones grinding together. It was a single word, amplified by some unseen force, echoing through the silent forest. A word that was not a word, but a concept. A statement of intent. Consume. Then the body dissolved. Not into dust, not into liquid. It simply unraveled. It came apart into a cloud of shimmering gray particles, like television static, which hung in the air for a moment before being drawn into the ground, leaving no trace it had ever been there. The Pathfinder stood frozen, the magnitude of what they had just witnessed washing over them. They had fought men and machines. This was something else. This was a violation of the laws of physics. "Rostova," Elias said, his voice struggling to remain steady. "Get me a priority channel to command, red-level encryption. Tell them, Protocol Umbra is in effect." Protocol Umbra, the spooky file, the one they joked about during training. The procedure for contact with forces designated non-mundane hostiles. It had always been a theoretical exercise. A what-if scenario for first contact gone wrong. No one had ever expected to use it. High above them, unseen in the dense canopy, a wisp of mist that smelled of ozone and petrichor watched them. Nerah had felt the static's awakening. It was a foul taste on the currents of the ether, a discordant note in the symphony of existence. She had been drawn to it, as a storm is drawn to a low-pressure system. She watched the soldiers, clad in their shells of metal and ceramic. They were loud in her senses, their technology screaming into the electromagnetic spectrum, their heartbeats a frantic, clumsy drumbeat against the deep silence of the woods. They were fragile, ephemeral things, so terrified of the dark. And yet, they had not broken. They had not fled in mindless panic. They stood their ground. They tried to understand. They tried to fight. The one who led them, the one called Sergeant, his mind was a fortress of discipline and grim resolve. There was an old storm in him, too, a quiet fury, banked but not extinguished. Nerah felt a flicker of something she hadn't felt in centuries. It was not hope. It was not pity. It was curiosity. The static had consumed her people. It had unmade her world. For 1,000 years, she had been the sole guardian of that memory, the lonely hunter of its echoes. Now, these loud, fragile creatures had stumbled into her ancient war. They had no idea what they were facing. They would be scoured from this world, their thoughts and histories erased, their souls becoming just another whisper in the all-consuming noise. Unless the mist that was Nerah swirled, a silent vortex of starlight and shadow. The soldiers below were calling their masters, bringing their science and their weapons to bear against a foe that fed on order and reason. It would be like trying to shoot a nightmare with a bullet.
But a nightmare could be fought by another dream. A silence could be broken by a storm. Nerah let the thought take root. Her purpose had always been to remember and to hunt. Perhaps now it was time to act. She dissolved further, becoming one with the wind, and flowed down from the canopy, a silent, unseen current, towards the clearing of the standing stones, where the veil between worlds was wearing dangerously thin. Chapter 2. The Echo in the Machine. Dr. Aris Thorne hated the smell of pine.
It was the cloying, artificial scent pumped through the vents of cheap hotels and public transit, a chemical lie meant to evoke feelings of nature and calm. The real thing, he discovered, was far more potent and infinitely more unsettling. It was the smell of decay and damp earth, a primordial perfume that clung to his lab coat and burrowed into his sinuses. His temporary lab was set up in a hermetically sealed modular containment unit at the newly established Forward Operating Base Nightingale, carved hastily out of the woods 5 kilometers from the dead zone. Outside, the sounds of military efficiency were a constant thrum. The whine of grav lifts hauling equipment, the rhythmic tramp of armored boots on prefab decking, the clipped jargon of soldiers shouting orders. Inside, there was only the hum of his equipment and the oppressive, pine-scented silence from the samples he was analyzing. Aris ran a hand through his already disheveled black hair, his eyes bloodshot from staring at holographic displays for 36 hours straight. On the main screen, a 3D model of a soil sample rotated slowly. The sample was from the clearing. To the naked eye, it was just dirt. Under his quantum resonance scanner, it was a horror show. The cellular structure of the organic matter, it's just gone, he murmured to himself, dictating notes to his AI assistant, Kepler. There's no microbial life, no bacteria, no fungi. The plant matter is just carbon husks. The molecular bonds are intact, but the information, the DNA, the complex protein chains, it's been wiped, scoured clean. Query, Doctor. Kepler's calm, synthesized voice emanated from a speaker on the console. Is this consistent with any known radiation or chemical agent? No, Aris sighed, slumping back in his chair. Gamma radiation would shatter the DNA. Neutron bombardment would leave isotopic traces. A chemical agent would leave residues. This is like taking a book and erasing the words, but leaving the blank pages perfectly intact. It's information entropy on a biological scale. It's impossible. He was a physicist, a specialist in quantum entanglement and extra-dimensional theory. He dealt with the elegant, esoteric mathematics that describe the fabric of the universe. He was supposed to be at a conference in Geneva presenting a paper on stable wormhole metrics. Instead, he'd been yanked out of his hotel by 2 humorless military policemen, thrown on a suborbital transport, and deposited in the middle of a forest in the North American continent because his estranged brother had invoked Protocol Umbra. Elias. He hadn't spoken to his older brother in 2 years, not since their father's funeral. The argument had been brutal. Aris, the academic prodigy who saw the military as a blunt instrument for archaic minds. Elias, the career soldier who saw Aris's world of theories and equations as a cowardly retreat from reality. 2 sides of the same coin, their father used to say. Both stubborn, both brilliant, both convinced they were right. Now, Elias's reality had crashed headlong into Aris's theories, and Aris was the one struggling to keep up. He pulled up the helmet cam footage from Elias's team. He'd watched it a dozen times, and each time the cold dread intensified. The silent, waxy bodies, the shimmering distortion in the air, the man unraveling into a cloud of what? He'd analyzed the particle signature Rostova's suit had managed to capture. It wasn't matter, it wasn't energy. It was a quantum state with no definable properties, a flicker between being and not being. The static, Elias had called it. The name was chillingly apt. It was a signal that contained no information, only noise.
and its effect was to impose that state on everything it touched. A chime at the door of his lab broke his concentration. A moment later, Elias entered, his face grim. His armor swapped for standard fatigues that still seemed stretched tight over his muscular frame. He looked tired, the lines around his eyes deeper than Aris remembered. "Anything, Aris?" Elias's voice was devoid of pleasantries. "Everything and nothing," Aris replied, gesturing at the screens. "I can tell you what is happening, I just can't tell you how or why. Whatever this phenomenon is, it targets information. It doesn't destroy matter, it nullifies its complexity. It reduces it to its most basic, inert state. In biological terms, it kills the soul, for lack of a better word, before it kills the body." Elias nodded slowly, his gaze fixed on the footage of the dissolving corpse. "The husks. We're calling them echoes. We found more of them, a whole hiking trail full. Same MO. No wounds, just empty. And the entity itself, the distortion? We've been sending drones in. We lose contact the moment they cross the 10-click perimeter."
The last audio feed we got back from one before it went dead, it was just that sound, the whispers, the static. Elias rubbed the back of his neck. Command is getting nervous. They're talking about containment protocols, glassing the whole damn forest from orbit. Aris felt a chill that had nothing to do with the lab's air conditioning. They can't. We don't know what this is. A brute force response could make it worse. What if it feeds on energy? A plasma strike could be like throwing gasoline on a fire. What if it's a consciousness? We'd be committing an act of war against a concept. And what's your alternative? We sit here and let it spread? Elias's voice was sharp. It's expanding, Aris. The dead zone. It grew by 200 meters last night. It's slow, but it's moving. The town of Rockton is only 30 clicks away. The brothers stared at each other across the sterile lab, the chasm of their old arguments yawning between them. Elias, the pragmatist, saw a threat that needed to be neutralized. Aris, the theorist, saw a phenomenon that needed to be understood. Before the argument could escalate, a new alert flashed on Aris's console. It was from one of the deep-field sensor arrays they'd placed at the edge of the perimeter. "What is it?" Elias asked, stepping closer. "An atmospheric anomaly," Aris said, his fingers flying across the holographic interface. "A highly localized cyclonic weather pattern forming right on the edge of the dead zone. Barometric pressure just dropped by 50 millibars in 10 seconds. Wind speeds, that can't be right. It's reading gusts up to 200 kilometers per hour. There's no storm on the satellite feed," Elias said, looking at a secondary monitor. "The sky is clear." "This isn't a weather pattern, Elias. It's a point source energy event." Aris's eyes widened as more data flowed in. "There's a massive electromagnetic field building. It's a different signature from the static. It's not null. It's chaotic, powerful, but structured, like a directed energy release. And it's moving. It's moving into the zone." On the screen, a swirling vortex of energy signatures, represented in angry reds and yellows, slammed into the calm, dead blue of the static's perimeter. "Kepler," Aris commanded, his voice tight with excitement. "Patch the audio feed from sensor post 4 through the main speakers. Filter out the wind noise." A moment of silence. Then the lab was filled with a sound that was both terrifying and beautiful. It was the roar of a hurricane, the crackle of 1,000 lightning strikes, the deep, resonant boom of thunder. But woven within it was something else, a voice. It was not male or female, but a chord of many tones, singing in a language that felt older than mountains. It was a song of rage and defiance, a war cry. Elias gripped the hilt of the combat knife on his webbing. "What in the hell is that?" Aris didn't answer. He was staring, mesmerized at the data stream. The blue of the static's energy field was receding, breaking apart under the onslaught of the storm. The null field was being disrupted, torn apart by a raw elemental force. "Whatever it is," Aris breathed, a wild scientific curiosity overriding his fear. "It's fighting it." Nerah struck the edge of the dead zone like a thunderbolt. In her Wraithwind form, she was a being of pure atmospheric fury. A miniature sentient cyclone, her core a vortex of swirling starlight, her edges blade-thin winds that screamed with kinetic energy. She did not perceive the static's domain with eyes or ears, but as a blasphemous stillness, a patch of reality that had been muted, its song silenced. To her, the world was a symphony. Every tree had a resonant frequency, every creature a unique rhythm, the planet itself a deep bass hum. The static was a creeping deafness, a cancer of silence that sought to erase the music of existence. Her rage was not a human emotion, it was a physical force, a high-pressure system of will crashing against a low-pressure system of nihilism. She plunged into the zone, and the static reacted. The air grew thick, resistant, like moving through setting concrete. The whispers clawed at her consciousness, not with words, but with insidious, logical propositions of nothingness. Why struggle? All things end. All energy dissipates. All information is lost to entropy. We are but the acceleration of the inevitable. Surrender. Be still. Be silent. Manifestations of the static, the shimmering, multi-jointed things Elias had glimpsed, congealed from the silent air to meet her. They were a physical embodiment of wrongness, their forms shifting, their limbs bending at impossible angles. They did not attack with claws or teeth, but with proximity. To get too close to them was to have the very information that constituted her being start to unravel.
Nerah answered them not with logic, but with lightning. Tendrils of pure electricity, white-hot and jagged, lashed out from her cyclotic form, striking the static constructs. They did not burn or explode, they simply lost cohesion. The complex, unnatural geometry of their forms collapsed under the chaotic energy assault, their structures devolving into the gray, shimmering particles that were their base state, which were then scattered by her winds. She was a storm, and a storm does not negotiate. It scours, it tears down, it reshapes. She drove a wedge into the silent territory, a roaring 10-kilometer front of wind and lightning, reclaiming the forest from the creeping void. The trees, which had stood as silent, informationless husks, began to tremble as she passed. The memory of what they were, stored in the very soil, in the planet's magnetic field, in the echo of sunlight on their dead leaves, was reawakened by her energy. Faint traces of chlorophyll green began to ghost through their bark. The air, once acrid and still, now smelled of rain and ozone. But the fight took its toll. The static was insidious. It did not push back with equal force. It absorbed her energy, deadening it. It was like screaming into a vacuum. For every construct she dispersed, two more would form at the edges of her influence. She was a finite storm, battering an infinite silence. She could push it back, she could hurt it, but she knew she could not destroy it this way. It was too vast. It was not an army to be defeated. It was an ocean of nothingness, and she was a single, furious hurricane upon its surface. She felt them watching her, the mortals. Their strange, artificial senses were pointed at her, trying to measure her, to quantify her. They felt her power, but they could not comprehend its nature. They were like ants trying to understand the sun. Exhaustion began to fray the edges of her form. The core of her being, the mortal soul that had been fused with the storm so long ago, ached with a weariness that was bone deep, even though she no longer possessed bones. She had been fighting this war alone for so long. She needed a new strategy. The static was anchored here, its presence strongest around the ancient standing stones. It had created a beachhead, a wound in the veil through which it could pour its nullifying influence. To fight the tide, she had to find the source of the leak.
With a final, defiant roar of thunder that shook the very bedrock, she pulled her energy back, consolidating her form. The cyclone dissipated, the winds died down, and the lightning faded into the mist. She settled to the forest floor and the territory she had reclaimed, coalescing once more into the shape of a woman sculpted from starlight and shadow. She looked towards the military base, a ugly, geometric scar on the living forest. The soldiers were a blunt instrument. Their weapons were crude, their understanding non-existent. But they were a force of order and will, and the static was a force of chaos and dissolution. Perhaps, just perhaps, they could be honed. They could be a weapon if only they could be pointed in the right direction. And there was the other one, the one in the sterile box, surrounded by his glowing screens. His mind was different. It was sharp, inquisitive, reaching out to the universe not with faith or instinct, but with the cold, beautiful logic of mathematics. He was trying to read her song as if it were sheet music. He did not understand the melody, but he was beginning to recognize the notes. A dangerous idea formed in Nerah's ancient mind, a partnership. It was a risk. Mortals were fragile, greedy, and short-sighted. They broke what they did not understand. But the static was an absolute threat. And to fight the absolute, sometimes one had to embrace the impossible. She took a step, her bare, mist-like feet making no sound on the damp leaves, and began to walk towards the perimeter of FOB Nightingale. It was time for the ghost to talk to the machine. Chapter 3: The Ghost and the Machine. FOB Nightingale went on high alert. The unidentified energy phenomenon, designated Tempest, had ceased its advance and seemed to be consolidating. But then a new contact appeared on the perimeter sensors. A single humanoid biosignature, walking out of the newly dubbed storm wall zone. It had no heat signature, no electronic emissions, and was surrounded by a localized atmospheric disturbance that played havoc with their targeting systems. Elias Thorne stood on the command deck of the FOB Central Tower, watching the main view screen. A drone feed showed the entity. It was a woman, or the shape of one. She moved with an unnerving grace, her form flickering at the edges, seeming to be made of dense fog and captured starlight. She looked towards the military base, a definition of one of the best at ROG in the world. She wore no clothes, yet she was not naked. The swirling mist that composed her was its own concealment, its own raiment. She walked calmly towards their main gate. "Hold your fire," Elias commanded into the comm network, his voice sharp enough to cut steel. "I want every weapon trained on her, but nobody pulls a trigger without my direct order. Is that understood?" A chorus of affirmatives answered him. The tension on the base was a palpable thing. Soldiers in full combat armor took up positions along the perimeter walls, their XR-90s aimed at the lone figure. The automated defense turrets, capable of firing 30mm depleted uranium rounds at 10,000 rounds per minute, swiveled to track her, their targeting lasers painting a dozen crimson dots on her shimmering form. Aris was at his side, his face pale, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and exhilaration. "Elias, her energy readings are off the charts. She is the storm. She's not controlling it, she's the focal point. The readings are identical to the Tempest signature, just concentrated into a stable humanoid form." "So what is she?" Elias asked, his hand resting on the grip of his sidearm. "An alien? A machine?" "I don't know," Aris admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "The laws of physics as we understand them don't account for a self-sustaining, sentient plasma vortex shaped like a person." The figure stopped about 50 meters from the gate. She made no move, no hostile gesture. She simply stood there, watching them, her glowing eyes seeming to pierce through the drone's camera lens and stare directly into the command center. "She wants to talk," Aris said. "Or she wants us to lower our guard so she can wipe us out," Elias countered, though he didn't believe it. There was no menace in her posture, only an immense, ancient stillness. "Let me go out there,"
Aris said suddenly. Elias turned to him incredulous. "Are you insane? We have no idea what she is." "She's not the static," Aris insisted, pointing at his data feeds. "Her energy signature is the polar opposite. The static is entropy, null information. She is complex, chaotic energy. She's order, of a kind we don't understand. She's the enemy of our enemy, Elias. This is our chance to understand what we're fighting." Elias hesitated. His tactical mind screamed at him that this was a trap. But his gut, which had kept him alive on Mars and Jupiter, told him his brother was right. This creature, whatever it was, had single-handedly done more damage to the static in 1 hour than his entire regiment could do in a year. "All right," Elias said, making a decision, "but not alone. I'm coming with you. Carter and Rostova, too. Full armor. We go out the main gate. No vehicles. We show we're not afraid, but we don't show aggression." He keyed his comm. "Commander on deck. I am proceeding outside the wire to make contact with the entity. Designation, Wraith. Major Reynolds, you have command. If she makes a hostile move, you open up with everything you've got. Burn the ground she stands on." The air outside the FOB's climate-controlled command center was heavy and charged with ozone. The smell of the recent storm was everywhere. Elias, Aris, Carter, and Rostova walked slowly through the main gate, the massive Durasteel doors hissing shut behind them. Aris was in a standard-issue uniform, looking small and vulnerable next to the 3 soldiers in their hulking Pathfinder armor. As they approached, Nerah watched them. She could feel the fear coming off them in waves, a sharp, sweaty scent on the wind. She could feel the hum of their weapons, the low-level radiation from their power packs. The one in the lead, the sergeant, his mind was a wall of disciplined focus. The larger one, Carter, was a bundle of barely controlled aggression. The female, Rostova, was sharp, analytical, her mind constantly cataloging and assessing. And then there was the other one, the one without armor, Aris. His mind was not a wall, but a window, an open, furiously curious intellect, desperately trying to fit what he was seeing into the framework of his understanding. He was the one. He was the key. She focused her will, drawing on the moisture in the air, the ions, the stray electrons, and for the first time in over a millennium, she spoke in a human tongue. The language was ancient, a Proto-Indo-European dialect she had plucked from the genetic memory of the forest itself, but she shaped it with her intent, forcing comprehension upon the listeners. Her voice was not a sound that came from her mouth, but one that seemed to resonate directly inside their skulls, a chorus of wind and thunder and falling rain. "You are loud," the voice echoed in their minds. "Your world screams with metal and light. You are blind to the silence that comes to devour you." The 4 of them stopped dead. Carter raised his rotary cannon slightly, and Elias put a hand on his arm. What are you?" Elias asked, his own voice sounding thin after hers. "I am the memory of the storm. I am the echo of the wind. I am Nerah. I am the last Wraithwind." Aris took a hesitant step forward, his eyes wide. "Wraithwind? What does that mean? Your energy signature, it defies thermodynamics. How do you maintain a stable form?" Nerah's glowing eyes fixed on him. The sheer weight of her attention was a physical pressure. "You seek to measure the hurricane with a teacup, little scholar. Your science is a child's map of a boundless ocean. You see the laws. I am the exception that proves them." "Why are you here?" Elias cut in, bringing the conversation back to tactical reality. "You attacked the dead zone. You fought those things. What you call the static, I call the hunger, the great silence. It is an old enemy. It consumed my world. It consumed my people. It unmade my history. Now it comes for yours." The conviction in her telepathic voice was absolute, a truth as fundamental as gravity. "You fought it,
Aris said, his mind racing. "Your energy disrupts its field. How?" "The hunger erases. It simplifies. It is the perfect order of nothingness. I am chaos. I am the storm. I am the uncontrolled, unpredictable energy of life. I am the antithesis of silence. Where I rage, it cannot gain purchase." "Then help us," Elias said, the words costing him more than he would admit. A soldier asking for help was one thing. A soldier asking a ghost storm for help was another entirely. "We have weapons. We have soldiers. We don't know how to fight this thing." Nerah's form seemed to shimmer more intensely. "Your weapons are toys. Your bullets are raindrops against a mountain. You fire solid matter at an absence of matter. You cannot kill a void." "But you can," Rostova spoke for the first time, her voice filtered through her helmet speaker, calm and measured. "We saw your energy readings. You were pushing it back." "I can wound it. I can hold it at bay. But it is an ocean, and I am a single storm. It learns. It adapts. It will find a way to dampen my energy, to ground my lightning. I cannot destroy it alone." Her gaze swept over them. "But you have something I do not. You have hands. You have machines. You have the ingenuity of the desperate." "What do you propose?" Elias asked, suspicion and a nascent hope warring within him. "The hunger has a heart in this place, a wound in the veil between worlds. It is anchored to the standing stones your people built long ago. Your ancestors knew of the hunger. They built the stones not as a temple, but as a lock, a ward. The hunger has spent 1,000 years picking that lock. Now it is open." Aris's mind lit up. "The stones, of course. They're not random. They're arranged in a specific geometric pattern. They're resonating with the planet's magnetic field. They're not just rocks. They're components of a massive machine. A machine we don't understand." "The scholar is clever," Nerah's voice echoed. "The lock can be closed again, but the key is lost. It requires a convergence. The energy of the storm, which is me, the will of mortals, which is you, and the knowledge of the machine, which is broken." "What do you need from us?" Elias pressed. Nerah's form shifted, and one of her misty arms lifted, pointing a slender starlit finger towards the dead zone. "I will be the sword. You will be the shield. I will fight the hunger in the way I know how, on the plane of energy, of spirit. You will fight its manifestations in your world. The husks, the echoes. They are its antibodies, its immune system. They will swarm to protect its heart. You must hold them back." Her gaze returned to Aris. "And you, little scholar, you must rediscover the knowledge. The stones are the lock. Your science is the key. You must find a way to use your technology to amplify the stones' power, to align them, to turn the ward back on. You must build a cage of physics to trap a metaphysical predator." It was an insane plan. A ghost general giving orders to a military unit and a civilian scientist. But it was the only plan they had. Elias looked at Aris, whose eyes were shining with the light of 1,000 new theories. He looked at Carter and Rostova, who were looking at him, their expressions unreadable behind their visors, waiting for his command. He looked back at the ethereal, terrifyingly beautiful being of storm and starlight. "All right," Elias said, the word feeling heavy, historic.
We have a deal. You be the sword, we'll be the shield." A faint, dry crackle, like static electricity, might have been Nerah's version of a satisfied smile. "Then the war begins anew. Be ready. The silence has felt my presence. It has felt your intrusion. It knows we are allied against it. It will not be idle.
It will come for your minds, for your technology, for the heart of your noisy, fragile world." With that, her form dissolved. Not in a flash, but like sugar melting in water. She unraveled into a swirling gust of wind that smelled of ozone, which then rushed back into the forest, leaving the four of them standing alone in the sudden, profound quiet. Carter finally lowered his weapon. "Sarge, what the hell did we just get ourselves into?" Elias stared into the dark, silent woods where the Wraithwind had vanished. "The only fight that matters, Corporal," he said softly. "The only fight that matters." Part 2. The Cacophony War. Chapter 4. The Geometry of Fear. The alliance was as strange as it was necessary. Fob Nightingale became the nexus of two colliding realities. On one side, the rigid, logical world of military science. On the other, the chaotic, elemental power of Nerah. The days fell into a grim, surreal rhythm. By day, Elias's Pathfinders, now reinforced by 2 more squads from the 7th Regiment, ran reconnaissance and combat patrols along the storm wall, the fluctuating border between Nerah's domain and the Static's dead zone. They learned quickly that conventional warfare was useless. The echoes, the reanimated husks of the Static's victims, were the primary threat. They moved with an unnatural, jerky speed, their milky eyes devoid of life. They didn't use weapons. They simply swarmed, their touch causing a creeping, systemic failure in both electronics and living tissue. A soldier grazed by an echo would find their armor's power supply draining inexplicably. A direct touch for more than a few seconds would lead to paralysis, followed by the same waxy, empty state as the other victims. The soldiers learned to fight them with fire and electricity. Flamethrowers, repurposed from engineering corps, could keep the echoes at bay, as they seemed to have an aversion to rapid, chaotic energy release. The most effective weapon proved to be the Arccaster, a prototype crowd control device Rostova and her tech team jerry-rigged. It fired a sustained bolt of high-amperage electricity that would cause the echoes to short-circuit, their stolen neural pathways overloading and their forms dissolving into the now familiar gray static. Combat was a terrifying, disorienting affair. The echoes did not scream or bleed. They made no sound at all, save the dry rustle of their clothes. They would emerge from the silent woods and waves, a horde of walking dead, and the Pathfinders would meet them with roaring flame and crackling lightning, a pocket of violent noise in a world of profound silence. At night, Nerah would renew her assault. From the command tower, Elias and his team would watch the horizon erupt in a silent, breathtaking display of power. Sheets of lightning would illuminate the forest, the deep bass of thunder rolling through the ground, a nightly storm that never rained. On their sensor screens, they would see the blue of the Static's territory shrink under the onslaught of Nerah's angry red energy. But by morning she would be spent, her energy receding, and the blue would creep back, reclaiming some of the lost ground. It was a war of attrition, a tidal struggle on a metaphysical shore. Aris, meanwhile, was locked in his own battle. He lived in his lab, fueled by stimulants and an obsessive, burning need to understand. He had converted the entire FOB sensor array to focus on the standing stones, running terabytes of data through his quantum supercomputer. Nerah had given him the what, he had to figure out the how.
She called them a lock, he explained to Elias during one of their brief late-night strategy sessions, pointing to a complex holographic model of the stones. And she's right, they're not just granite. The rock is shot through with veins of a naturally occurring superconductive crystal, which is why our initial scans were so weird. They act as focusing lenses for the planet's geomagnetic field. In English, Aris, Elias said, rubbing his tired eyes. Imagine the Earth's magnetic field is just ambient noise, Aris said, his hands moving, shaping the hologram. The stones are like a series of acoustic mirrors. They collect that noise, amplify it, and focus it into a coherent frequency, a specific note. And that note for millennia has been resonating at a frequency that reinforces the stability of our local reality. It strengthens the veil, as she calls it. It acts as a shield against things like the static. So the shield is down? Worse, the static has been picking the lock. It's been subtly altering the resonance of the stones over centuries. It's retuned them. Now, instead of broadcasting a frequency that repels it, the stones are broadcasting a frequency that attracts it. They've turned a lighthouse into a homing beacon. That's the heart she was talking about. It's not a creature, it's a broadcast. Elias felt a cold knot form in his stomach. So how do we turn it off? We can't just turn it off. That would be like dropping the shield entirely. We have to retune it. We have to broadcast our own signal, a counter-frequency to overwrite the static's broadcast and force the stones back to their original protective resonance. Aris looked exhausted, but his eyes burned with fierce intelligence. The problem is, we don't have the power source. To generate a signal strong enough to overpower the static would require a multi-terawatt energy output. We'd need to plug a small star into the stones. Or a storm, Elias said, the pieces clicking into place. Aris nodded. Or a storm. Nerah, she is the power source. But her energy is chaotic, untamed. We need a way to channel it, to focus her raw power into a precise, coherent frequency and pump it into the stones. We need to build a metaphysical radio transmitter with a ghost for a battery. The plan was codenamed Operation Maelstrom. The goal was twofold. Phase 1, Elias and his pathfinders would have to escort Aris and a team of engineers to the standing stones, deep inside the dead zone, and protect them while they set up the equipment. Phase 2, Nerah would have to channel her full power into Aris's device, a gamble that could either close the wound in the veil or drain her completely, leaving them defenseless. The first challenge was communication. Nerah never came to the base again. She remained in the woods, a constant, stormy presence on the edge of their senses. They needed to talk to her, to coordinate. It was Aris who found the way. She's a being of energy and information, he reasoned. She communicates telepathically. That's just a form of data transmission. If we can modulate a carrier wave to the right frequency. He built a device, a small transmitter that emitted a low-power maser beam. Instead of data, it broadcast a simple, repeating mathematical pattern, the Fibonacci sequence, a universal symbol of order and life. He hoped it would be a signal she could recognize, a knock on the door. Elias and Aris took the device to the edge of the storm wall. Aris activated it, aiming the beam into the churning, energy-filled woods. For a long time, nothing happened. Then the wind picked up. The trees began to sway, and a mist that smelled of ozone swirled around them. Nerah's voice echoed in their minds, no longer a chorus of thunder, but a soft whisper, like leaves rustling. The little scholar learns a new language. Aris, holding the transmitter, spoke into a microphone attached to it. His words were converted into a modulated signal. Nerah, we have a plan. We think we know how to retune the stones. He explained his theory, the science, the technology they would need to build. Elias watched the swirling mist, half expecting it to reject their crude mechanical solution. There was a long silence, filled only by the whisper of the wind. Your plan is audacious, Nerah's voice finally came. It is like trying to harness a hurricane with a net of spider silk. But the logic is sound. The stones are the anchor. My power is the lever. Your machine may be the fulcrum. Will you do it? Elias asked. Will you be our power source? That is why I am here, she replied. The wind swirled more fiercely. But know this. To do this, I must pour all of myself into your machine. I will be vulnerable. The storm cannot also be the shield. While I am connected to the stones, I cannot fight the hunger. That task will fall to you alone. Its manifestations will feel its heart being threatened. They will throw everything they have at you. You will be defending the eye of the hurricane, and the storm will not be able to help you. We understand, Elias said, his voice firm. We will hold the line. See that you do, Sergeant of the Loud World, the voice whispered. And then the mist dissolved, and the wind died down, leaving them alone with their impossible plan. The next 72 hours were a frantic blur of activity. Under Aris's direction, the FOB's engineers constructed the resonator. It was a strange-looking device, part scientific instrument, part arcane artifact. At its heart was a core of hyper-cooled quantum processors. Radiating from this core were 3 deployable conduits, designed to be attached directly to the main standing stones. These conduits would channel Nerah's energy, while Aris's processors would modulate it, converting her chaotic power into the precise counter-frequency needed to retune the stones. The whole assembly was mounted on a shielded, all-terrain grav hauler. On the 3rd day, they were ready.
A convoy of 3 armored personnel carriers and the grav hauler carrying the resonator sat idling at the main gate, their engines a low thrum against the forest's silence. Elias stood with his command squad, looking out at the 10-kilometer stretch of hostile, silent territory they would have to cross. As if on cue, the nightly storm on the horizon died down. The lightning ceased. The thunder fell silent. Nerah was conserving her energy. The storm wall fell. For the first time, the entire dead zone lay open before them. The silence from the forest was absolute. "This is it," Rostova said, her voice tight over the comm. "The eye of the hurricane." "All right, people, listen up." Elias's voice cut through the tension. "We are going into hell. Our job is to get Dr. Thorne and his machine to the objective, get it running, and hold until it's done. Expect heavy resistance, the worst we've ever seen. No surrender, no retreat. We are the only thing standing between that town and whatever that is. We are the shield. Let's go make our stand." The gates of FOB Nightingale hissed open, and the convoy rolled out, leaving the relative safety of the base behind and plunging headlong into the heart of the great silence. The journey was unnervingly quiet. The forest was a dead thing, the trees like gray statues, the ground carpeted in lifeless brown leaves. Their vehicle sensors were useless, showing nothing but white noise. They were driving blind, relying on old-fashioned visual reconnaissance. They were halfway to the stones when the attack came. It wasn't a swarm of echoes this time. It was something new. The ground ahead of them began to bulge, to ripple like disturbed water. Then it erupted. A creature of earth and dead wood burst from the ground, a golem of the static's will. It was immense, easily 12 meters tall, its body a chaotic mass of dirt, rock, and splintered trees, held together by the same shimmering null field they'd seen in the clearing. It had no head, only a swirling vortex of gray static where its face should have been. "Contact!" the lead APC driver screamed. "Goliath-class hostile." The creature, a Goliath, swung a tree trunk-sized arm, and the lead APC was swatted aside like a toy, crumpling into a wreck of twisted metal. The convoy ground to a halt. "All units, open fire!" Elias roared.
The remaining APCs and Carter, who was manning the pintle-mounted cannon on the grav hauler, unleashed a torrent of firepower.
30mm rounds, plasma boats, and heavy laser fire slammed into the Goliath. The projectile struck its body, causing explosions of dirt and splinters, but they did no real damage. The null field that held it together seemed to absorb the kinetic and thermal energy, dissipating it harmlessly. "It's not working, Sarge," Carter yelled, his cannon glowing red from the strain. "It's like we're shooting at a ghost made of dirt." The Goliath took another step, the ground shaking, its static vortex face emitting that soul-chilling hum. "Aris," Elias yelled into the comm, "any ideas? We can't scratch this thing." Aris's voice came back, strained and breathless from inside the grav hauler. "It's field. It's absorbing directed energy. Don't shoot at it. You're just feeding it. We need something chaotic, something unpredictable." Chaotic, unpredictable. The word sparked an idea in Elias's mind, an idea born from watching Nerah storms. "Ristova, your arccaster, can you overload it?" "Sir." "Overload the power cell, force a catastrophic, uncontrolled discharge. I want an arc of lightning, not a steady beam. Can you do it?" I can try, sir. It'll destroy the weapon and maybe the APC's entire power system with it. Just do it." Elias watched from his command hatch as Ristova in the second APC wrestled with the arccaster. Sparks flew from the weapon's housing. The Goliath was raising its arm for another strike. "Now, Eva, now!" The top of the second APC erupted in a blinding flash of white-blue light. A massive, untamed arc of pure electricity, jagged and wild like natural lightning, leapt from the arccaster and slammed into the Goliath's chest. The effect was instantaneous. The chaotic, unpredictable energy of the arc was something the Goliath's field could not absorb. It overloaded. The null field flickered violently and then collapsed. For a second, the creature's form held, a giant statue of dirt and wood. Then, with a deep, grinding groan, it crumbled, collapsing into a massive, inert pile of rubble. The convoy was silent for a moment, the soldiers staring in awe. "Status report," Elias said, his voice shaking slightly. "Lead APC is down. 3 casualties, 2 critical," Sato's voice reported grimly. "Second APC's power grid is fried from the discharge. We're immobile, but the hauler is intact." They were crippled, but the way was clear. "Leave the APCs," Elias ordered. "Sato, triage the wounded and get them into the hauler. Everyone else, we're on foot from here. Form a perimeter around the doctor. We're walking it in." The Pathfinders dismounted, forming a moving shield of armor and firepower around the precious cargo. They left their wrecked vehicles behind and pushed on, the standing stones now visible through the dead trees, silhouetted against the gloomy sky like the teeth of some great buried beast. The silence was waiting for them, and they knew, with a certainty that chilled them to the bone, that the worst was yet to come. Chapter 5. The Eye of the Storm. The clearing of the standing stones was a place of profound wrongness. The air was cold, thin, and carried the metallic taste of the static. The silence was a physical weight that pressed in on them, muffling the sound of their own breathing, their own heartbeats. It was a place where sound and life and hope came to die. "Get it set up, now," Elias ordered, his voice sounding flat in the oppressive quiet. The engineers, their faces pale and drawn, swarmed around the grav hauler, unlimbering the resonator. Aris directed them with a frantic energy, his voice a sharp counterpoint to the silence. "Conduit 1 to the northern stone, conduit 2 to the eastern, 3 to the southern, sync the power couplings, check the quantum core's coolant levels." Elias's pathfinders formed a circle around the operation, their backs to the stones, their weapons facing the silent, dead woods. They were a tiny island of warmth and life in an ocean of cold entropy. Every soldier was on edge,
their eyes scanning the trees, expecting an attack at any moment. But nothing came. The forest remained still, watchful. The silence stretched, tightening the knot of dread in their stomachs. "It's too quiet," Carter muttered, his hand resting on the trigger of a detached heavy pulse rifle he'd salvaged. "I don't like it." "It's letting us get set up," Rostova said, her voice low. "It's playing with us." "Aris, how much longer?" Elias barked. "We're almost there," Aris yelled back, his hands flying over a control panel. "Conduits are locked. Power couplings are green. We just need to initialize the core and we need Nerah." As if summoned by her name, a wind began to stir in the dead clearing. It started as a whisper, a sigh, then grew into a steady, swirling breeze that carried the scent of ozone and rain. Mist began to coalesce in the center of the stone circle, right beside the resonator.
It thickened, brightened, and then Nerah was there, her form more brilliant, more fiercely defined than they had ever seen her. She was burning with contained power, a star trapped in a human shape. Her voice entered their minds, sharp and urgent. "It is time. The hunger knows what you intend. It gathers its strength. I can feel it, a great weight of silence pressing against the veil. You must be ready." She turned her glowing eyes to Aris. "Scholar, is your net of spider silk ready to catch the hurricane?" Aris swallowed hard, nodding. "It's ready. I'll need you to channel your energy directly into the central receiver. I will modulate the frequency. It's going to feel invasive, like I'm reaching into your soul with a pair of forceps." A sound like dry lightning crackled from Nerah. "My soul has endured worse. Begin." She reached out, her hands of mist and starlight not quite touching the central crystal of the resonator. A torrent of raw, white-hot energy flowed from her into the machine. The resonator whined, its core glowing with a blinding light. The air filled with the shriek of protesting machinery and the roar of 1,000 thunderstorms. The ground vibrated, and the great standing stones began to hum, a deep, resonant bass note that shook their bones. "It's working!" Aris screamed over the din. "The stones are responding. The frequency is shifting. I'm getting a resonance cascade. We're overwriting its signal." On his screen, a waveform representing the static's malevolent broadcast was being slowly, but surely, flattened and replaced by a new, powerful wave. That was when the forest exploded. It wasn't an explosion of fire and shrapnel. It was an explosion of life, or rather, unlife. From all sides the echoes came, not in a wave, but a flood. Hundreds of them, their forms indistinct in the gloom, pouring from between the trees. The bodies of the GeoCorp team, the lost hikers, and others, people in clothes that were decades, even centuries out of date. All the victims of the static, their empty shells called to defend their master. "Contact! All sides!" Elias roared. "Open fire! Don't let them reach the stones!" The clearing erupted into a cacophony of violence. Plasma bolts, laser beams, and arcs of electricity tore into the ranks of the echoes. The first wave dissolved into gray static, but the second was right behind them, and a third behind that. It was a tide of silent walking corpses, and the pathfinders were the breakwater. Elias fought from the top of the grav hauler, his XR-90 set to full auto, cutting down echoes as they swarmed towards the engineers. Carter stood like a rock, his heavy pulse rifle scything through the horde. Sato, the medic, alternated between firing his sidearm and dragging wounded engineers to the relative safety behind the humming resonator. But there were too many. For every one they destroyed, 3 more took its place. They were being overwhelmed. An echo slipped past Carter's field of fire and lunged at one of the conduits attached to a standing stone. Before it could touch it, Rostova was there, tackling the creature to the ground and blasting it with her sidearm until it dissolved. She rose, a grim look on her face, and rejoined the line. The static was adapting. New forms began to appear among the echoes. Smaller, faster creatures that looked like twisted, skeletal dogs made of solidified shadow. They darted between the legs of the larger echoes, their jaws snapping, their touch just as deadly. They were stalkers, and they were flanking the Pathfinder's defensive line. "They're breaking through on the west side!" a soldier screamed before he was pulled down, his cry cut short as a half-dozen echoes swarmed him. "Aris, talk to me!" Elias yelled, reloading his rifle with shaking hands. His barrel was glowing hot. "Almost there! Another 30 seconds! The resonance is reaching critical! I just need more power!" Aris shouted back, his face illuminated by the light of his console, oblivious to the carnage around him. Nerah's form was flickering violently now, the light of her being dimming as she poured more and more of her essence into the machine. Her voice came into their minds, strained, a whisper of a whisper. "It fights me, inside the machine, trying to corrupt the signal. I cannot hold it much longer." The ground shook again, more violently this time. A new creature was rising from the forest. It was another Goliath, bigger than the last, its form a nightmarish amalgamation of rock, dead trees, and the wreckage of the 2 APCs they had left behind. Twisted metal plates formed a crude armor over its earthen body. It strode towards the clearing, immune to the small arms fire that peppered its hide. It raised a massive arm, preparing to smash the resonator, Nerah, and the entire plan to dust.
"It's over," Carter grunted, firing his weapon uselessly at the giant. Elias saw it all in a moment of terrible clarity. The Goliath, the swarming echoes, his dwindling number of soldiers, Nerah fading, Aris desperately working the console. They had failed. The shield was broken. And in that moment of despair, something in him snapped. It was not fear. It was not acceptance. It was a cold, pure, undiluted rage. A rage against the silence. A rage against the dying of the light. The quiet storm that had always lived inside him finally broke. "No," he snarled, a word that was a vow. "Not yet." He looked at the Goliath, then at the humming resonator. He saw the power flowing from Nerah, through the conduits, into the stones. An insane, desperate, last-ditch idea sparked in his mind. "Aris," he screamed, "can you reverse the flow, pull energy from the stones?" Aris looked up, his eyes wild. "What? That would be catastrophic. It would create an uncontrolled feedback loop. It would blow this whole clearing to kingdom come." "Just do it!" Elias roared. He ripped a grenade from his webbing, not a standard fragmentation grenade, but a plasma core incendiary designed to burn through starship hulls. He primed it. "Reroute the feedback loop to Conduit 1, the North Stone. Do it now!" Aris, seeing the look in his brother's eyes, didn't argue. His fingers flew across the console. "Rerouting. God help us, Elias. What are you doing?" "Being the shield," Elias said. He leapt from the hauler, sprinting directly towards the approaching Goliath. The monster barely registered him, its attention on the bigger threat of the resonator. Elias ran, his legs pumping, his lungs burning. He could feel the ground vibrating as Aris rerouted the power. The north standing stone began to glow with a furious, unbearable light. He was 10 meters from the Goliath when the feedback loop hit. A beam of pure, white-hot energy, a lance of untamed planetary and spiritual power, shot from the resonator and slammed into the North Stone. The ancient monolith couldn't handle the load. It began to crack, to groan, and then it exploded. But for a fraction of a second, before it detonated, it acted as a lens, focusing the energy beam forward. Elias dove to the side, rolling behind a small rocky outcrop. The world turned white. The roar of the energy discharge and the stone's explosion was deafening, a physical blow. The beam, a miniature sun, hit the Goliath square in the chest.
The giant didn't even have time to register the attack. It and everything in a 50-meter cone behind it was instantly vaporized, scoured from existence. The shockwave from the blast, a wave of pure kinetic force, tore through the clearing, ripping the swarming echoes and stalkers apart, blowing them away like dust in a hurricane. Silence returned. A true silence this time, not the oppressive weight of the static, but the simple absence of sound. Elias pushed himself up, his ears ringing, his armor scorched. The clearing was a scene of utter devastation. The North Stone was gone, a crater of molten rock in its place. The ranks of the echoes had been decimated. The few that remained were staggering, disoriented, their connection to the static's heart severed. But the resonator was damaged. Sparks flew from its console. 2 of the stones were still humming, but the circuit was broken. "Aris?" Elias croaked into his calm. "I'm here." His brother's voice came back, shaking. "The resonator it's failing. The feedback loop fried half its systems. The counter frequency is collapsing." The static's malevolent hum began to creep back into the air. The remaining echoes began to reform, to turn their milky eyes back towards them. But Nerah was still there. Her form was faint, almost transparent, a mere ghost of a ghost. But she was still channeling what little energy she had left into the 2 remaining stones. Her voice was the faintest whisper in his mind. "The lock is not closed, but it is broken. The broadcast is disrupted. It is enough, for now." She looked at Elias, and for the first time, he felt something from her that was not rage or weariness. It was respect. "You have a great storm within you, Sergeant Elias Thorne." Then her light faded completely. The mist that was her form did not disperse. It seemed to be drawn inwards, pulled into the 2 humming stones, as if they were absorbing her very essence. The humming intensified for a moment, the note changing, becoming purer, stronger. Then it settled into a steady, powerful tone that seemed to push back the cold, to fill the clearing with a feeling not of warmth, but of safety, of sanctuary. The remaining echoes staggered back as if struck. Then, one by one, they dissolved into harmless motes of gray dust, their animating force banished. The static was gone. Not defeated, but pushed back, its gateway sealed, its influence severed by a broken machine, a desperate soldier, and the sacrifice of a storm spirit. Elias stood in the silent, smoking clearing, surrounded by his few surviving soldiers. Aris climbed out of the hauler, staring at the 2 remaining stones, which now pulsed with a soft internal starlight. "She's in there," Aris whispered, his voice full of awe. "She didn't just power it. She became the new lock. She's the ward now. Her consciousness, her energy, fused with the stones, holding the gate closed." Elias walked over to the humming stones and placed a gauntleted hand on the cool, ancient rock. He couldn't hear her voice anymore. He couldn't feel her presence, but he could feel the energy thrumming within the stone. A steady, powerful, and eternal heartbeat. The last storm, now a silent, watchful guardian. He looked up at the sky. Through the canopy of the dead trees, he could see the first hints of dawn breaking. The long night was over. The war, he knew, was not. The static was still out there, in the silent places between worlds, and it was patient. But for now, they had won. The shield had held. "Let's get our people and go home," Elias said, his voice raw.
And as they gathered their wounded and began the long walk back to a world that would never know how close it had come to being erased, a soft, clean wind began to blow through the trees of Rockton's ancient woods, carrying with it the scent of ozone and petrichor and a promise of rain on a thirsty land. The storm was gone, but the wind remained, and it whispered a single, silent name: Nerah. Part 3. The Scars of Silence. Chapter 6. A Forest Reborn. The journey back was a silent procession of ghosts. The survivors, 7 pathfinders, Aris, and 4 engineers, moved through the woods, the grav hauler carrying their dead and wounded. But the forest itself was no longer dead. As the sun climbed higher, casting long, searching rays through the canopy, a profound transformation was taking place. The oppressive, absolute silence was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very soil. It was the sound of the stones, the ward, the lingering song of Nerah. And with the sound came life. A faint green haze, like the first blush of spring, began to tint the gray bark of the trees. Moss, which had been dry and brown, plumped with a vibrant, impossible verdancy. Elias watched as a single, withered fern by the path uncurled a new, green fiddlehead, the movement so rapid it was almost perceptible. The air, once stale and acrid, was now clean and rich with the smell of damp earth and growing things. "Life," Aris murmured, walking beside his brother, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's not just holding the static back. Her energy, it's a catalyst. It's actively reversing the entropy." A bird, a small brown sparrow, landed on a branch overhead and chirped. The simple, clear sound was so alien to the silence they had endured that every soldier flinched, their rifles snapping up before they realized what it was. The bird, startled, took flight, and the spell was broken. Another bird answered its call from deeper in the woods. Then another. Within minutes, the forest was alive with a tentative, growing chorus. They did not speak of what had happened in the clearing. The words were too large, too fragile for the air. They carried the memory in the way they moved, in the grim set of their jaws, and in the new haunted light in their eyes. They had looked into the void, and the void had been held back by a storm they could never explain. When the prefab walls of Fob Nightingale came into view, it felt like an intrusion, a profane thing of metal and right angles in a world that was suddenly, miraculously sacred and alive. The base was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Medics rushed the wounded to the infirmary. The dead were carried with grim reverence to the morgue. Elias stood, his armor scorched, his face streaked with grime, watching it all, feeling a dislocation he had never known. The rules of his world, of ballistics and tactics, of orders and objectives, felt like a child's game. He found Aris in the makeshift lab, already hunched over a console, the data from the resonator's final moments displayed on the holographic screen. The complex waveforms pulsed with the soft, starlight color he now associated with Nerah. "You should get some rest," Elias said. His voice sounded like gravel in a tin can. "How can I?" Aris asked, not looking away from the screen. "Do you know what this is? This is the energy signature of a soul, Elias, not a metaphor, a quantifiable, measurable soul. Her consciousness isn't just a passive barrier, it's a dynamic system. It's constantly adjusting, pushing back, reinforcing the quantum structure of this entire region. She didn't just die, she became a fundamental law of local physics." Elias walked over and looked at the elegant, pulsing lines of light. "Can you talk to her?" Aris finally looked up, his eyes full of a new, sober kind of awe. "No, that's the wrong way to think about it. I can't talk to gravity either, but I can study it. I can predict its effects. She's a presence, a constant. The wind in the trees, the charge in the air, the very fact that this forest is alive again. That's her now. That's how she talks." Before Elias could reply, the door to the lab slid open. A woman stood there, flanked by 2 military police in the stark black armor of the Special Command Division.
She was neither young nor old, with severe, gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun and a face that looked like it had been carved from ice. Her uniform was a crisp, unadorned black, bearing only a single silver insignia Elias didn't recognize, a stylized, closed eye. "Sergeant Thorne, Dr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was calm, quiet, and held an authority that made the air in the room feel cold. "I am Director Isadora Kael of the Umbra Directorate. This facility, this operation, and all related data are now under my direct jurisdiction. You are both to be debriefed immediately." The Umbra Directorate. So, Protocol Umbra wasn't just a file. It was a department, a secret, shadowy corner of the military charged with cleaning up the universe's nightmares. The debriefing took place in the command center, which Kael's people had already secured. Rostova, Carter, and Sato were there, along with the two Thorns. The story was told haltingly at first, then with a growing, feverish intensity. They spoke of the static, the echoes, the Goliaths, and of Nerah. They spoke of the Wraithwind sacrifice and the broken, humming stones that now stood guard in the woods. Kael listened without expression, her fingers steepled, her cold eyes missing nothing. When they were finished, the room was silent. "Your testimony corroborates energy and quantum signature readings we've been tracking from orbital platforms for the last 72 hours, she said, her voice betraying no surprise. "We have logged similar, though much weaker, null information events in 6 other locations across the globe over the past decade. All were dismissed as instrument failure or freak atmospheric events. We were wrong." She turned her gaze to Aris. "Doctor, your data on the static and the entity you call Nerah represents the single greatest leap in metaphysical and extra-dimensional science in human history. It is also the most terrifying." Then she looked at Elias. "Sergeant, your actions at the Standing Stones were reckless, insubordinate, and violated every tactical doctrine in the book. You sacrificed a multi-billion credit piece of experimental hardware and compromised the primary objective." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You also saved the lives of every person in this room and likely prevented an extinction-level event. Your commendation will be extensive and classified at the highest possible level." Elias simply nodded, too tired to feel vindicated. "The Rockton anomaly, as it will now be designated, is contained," Cal continued, rising to her feet, "thanks to Nerah's sacrifice. But the static is not a localized threat. It's a universal one. It's a predator that has just become aware that there is prey in this sector of space. What happened here was not an invasion. It was a test, a probe, and we just showed it that we can fight back." She activated the main view screen. A star chart of the known galaxy appeared. 7 systems, including their own, Sol, were circled in red. "These are the locations where we have detected trace elements of the static's null field signature," Cal said. "The other 6 are uninhabited, dead systems with strange geological formations that my directorate is now reassessing as potential locks similar to your Standing Stones. Rockton was the first active incursion into a populated system. It will not be the last." A new purpose began to dawn on Elias and Aris. This wasn't over. It was so much bigger than they could have imagined. "The Umbra Directorate was created for this contingency," Cal stated. "To be the shield against threats humanity is not ready to comprehend. For years, we have been a theoretical department, a collection of analysts and ghost stories. You have just given us our first case study, and our first real weapons." Her gaze fell on the 2 brothers. "Dr. Thorne, we need you to weaponize your knowledge. We need you to build more resonators, better ones. We need you to find a way to detect the static before it manifests. You will be given unlimited resources, a blank check from every government on Earth." She then turned to Elias.
Sergeant, your experience is unique. You have gone toe-to-toe with a conceptual enemy and survived. I am forming a new rapid response unit under the Directorate's command. Designation, Wraithwind Task Force. Its mission will be to investigate, contain, and, where possible, neutralize Umbra-level threats. I want you to lead it. You can pick your own team. I suspect Corporals Carter and Rostova and PFC Sato might be suitable candidates. The three soldiers in question straightened up, a new fire in their exhausted eyes. "This is not an order," Kyle said, her voice softening for the first time. "What you have endured here is more than any soldier should have to face. You can retire with full honors, and this will all be buried under a mountain of black ink. But if you accept, your war is just beginning. You will be the line, the lonely, silent guardians against the coming silence." Elias looked at Aris, who was already staring at the star chart, his mind alight with the terrifying, exhilarating challenge. He looked at Carter's grim nod, at Rostova's determined jaw, at Sato's quiet resolve. He thought of the humming stones in the reborn forest, the final, lonely vigil of the last Wraithwind. She had been the shield for 1,000 years. Now it was their turn. He met Director Kyle's icy gaze. "When do we start?" he asked. The journey back was a silent procession of ghosts. The survivors, 7 pathfinders, Aris, and 4 engineers, moved through the woods, the grav hauler carrying their dead and wounded. But the forest itself was no longer dead. As the sun climbed higher, casting long, searching rays through the canopy, a profound transformation was taking place. The oppressive, absolute silence was gone, replaced by a deep, resonant hum that seemed to emanate from the very soil. It was the sound of the stones, the ward, the lingering song of Nerah. And with the sound came life. A faint green haze, like the first blush of spring, began to tint the gray bark of the trees. Moss, which had been dry and brown, plumped with a vibrant, impossible verdancy. Elias watched as a single withered fern by the path uncurled a new green fiddlehead, the movement so rapid it was almost perceptible. The air, once stale and acrid, was now clean and rich with the smell of damp earth and growing things. "Life," Elias murmured, walking beside his brother, his eyes wide with wonder. "It's not just holding the static back. Her energy, it's a catalyst. It's actively reversing the entropy." A bird, a small brown sparrow, landed on a branch overhead and chirped. The simple, clear sound was so alien to the silence they had endured that every soldier flinched, their rifles snapping up before they realized what it was. The bird, startled, took flight, and the spell was broken. Another bird answered its call from deeper in the woods. Then another. Within minutes, the forest was alive with a tentative, growing chorus. They did not speak of what had happened in the clearing. The words were too large, too fragile for the air. They carried the memory in the way they moved, in the grim set of their jaws, and in the new, haunted light in their eyes. They had looked into the void, and the void had been held back by a storm they could never explain. When the prefab walls of FOB Nightingale came into view, it felt like an intrusion, a profane thing of metal and right angles in a world that was suddenly, miraculously sacred and alive. The base was a whirlwind of controlled chaos. Medics rushed the wounded to the infirmary. The dead were carried with grim reverence to the morgue. Elias stood, his armor scorched, his face streaked with grime, watching it all, feeling a dislocation he had never known. The rules of his world, of ballistics and tactics, of orders and objectives, felt like a child's game. He found Aris in the makeshift lab, already hunched over a console. The data from the resonator's final moments displayed on the holographic screen. The complex waveforms pulsed with the soft, starlight color he now associated with Nerah. "You should get some rest," Elias said. His voice sounded like gravel in a tin can. "How can I?" Aris asked, not looking away from the screen. Do you know what this is? This is the energy signature of a soul, Elias. Not a metaphor, a quantifiable, measurable soul. Her consciousness isn't just a passive barrier, it's a dynamic system. It's constantly adjusting, pushing back, reinforcing the quantum structure of this entire region. She didn't just die. She became a fundamental law of local physics. Elias walked over and looked at the elegant pulsing lines of light. Can you talk to her? Aris finally looked up, his eyes full of a new, sober kind of awe. No, that's the wrong way to think about it. I can't talk to gravity either, but I can study it. I can predict its effects. She's a presence, a constant. The wind in the trees, the charge in the air, the very fact that this forest is alive again. That's her now.
That's how she talks. Before Elias could reply, the door to the lab slid open. A woman stood there, flanked by 2 military police in the stark black armor of the Special Command Division. She was neither young nor old, with severe gray-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, and a face that looked like it had been carved from ice. Her uniform was a crisp, unadorned black, bearing only a single silver insignia Elias didn't recognize, a stylized, closed eye. "Sergeant Thorne, Dr. Thorne," she said. Her voice was calm, quiet, and held an authority that made the air in the room feel cold. "I am Director Isadora Kale of the Umbra Directorate. This facility, this operation, and all related data are now under my direct jurisdiction. You are both to be debriefed, immediately." The Umbra Directorate. So, Protocol Umbra wasn't just a file, it was a department. A secret, shadowy corner of the military charged with cleaning up the universe's nightmares. The debriefing took place in the command center, which Kale's people had already secured. Rostova, Carter, and Sato were there, along with the 2 Thorns. The story was told, haltingly at first, then with a growing feverish intensity. They spoke of the static, the echoes, the Goliaths, and of Nerah. They spoke of the Wraithwind sacrifice and the broken, humming stones that now stood guard in the woods. Kale listened without expression, her fingers steepled, her cold eyes missing nothing. When they were finished, the room was silent. "Your testimony corroborates energy and quantum signature readings we've been tracking from orbital platforms for the last 72 hours, she said, her voice betraying no surprise. "We have logged similar, though much weaker, null information events in 6 other locations across the globe over the past decade. All were dismissed as instrument failure or freak atmospheric events. We were wrong." She turned her gaze to Aris. "Doctor, your data on the static and the entity you call Nerah represents the single greatest leap in metaphysical and extra-dimensional science in human history. It is also the most terrifying." Then she looked at Elias. "Sergeant, your actions at the Standing Stones were reckless, insubordinate, and violated every tactical doctrine in the book. You sacrificed a multi-billion credit piece of experimental hardware and compromised the primary objective." She paused, letting the words hang in the air. "You also saved the lives of every person in this room and likely prevented an extinction-level event. Your commendation will be extensive and classified at the highest possible level." Elias simply nodded, too tired to feel vindicated. "The Rockton anomaly, as it will now be designated, is contained," Kyle continued, rising to her feet, "thanks to Nerah's sacrifice. But the static is not a localized threat. It's a universal one. It's a predator that has just become aware that there is prey in this sector of space. What happened here was not an invasion. It was a test, a probe, and we just showed it that we can fight back." She activated the main view screen. A star chart of the known galaxy appeared. 7 systems, including their own, Sol, were circled in red. "These are the locations where we have detected trace elements of the static's null field signature," Kyle said.
The other 6 are uninhabited, dead systems with strange geological formations that my directorate is now reassessing as potential locks, similar to your standing stones. Rockton was the first active incursion into a populated system. It will not be the last. A new purpose began to dawn on Elias and Aris. This wasn't over. It was so much bigger than they could have imagined. The Umbra Directorate was created for this contingency, to be the shield against threats humanity is not ready to comprehend. For years, we have been a theoretical department, a collection of analysts and ghost stories. You have just given us our first case study, and our first real weapons. Her gaze fell on the 2 brothers. Dr. Thorne, we need you to weaponize your knowledge. We need you to build more resonators, better ones. We need you to find a way to detect the static before it manifests. You will be given unlimited resources, a blank check from every government on Earth. She then turned to Elias. Sergeant, your experience is unique. You have gone toe-to-toe with a conceptual enemy and survived. I am forming a new rapid response unit under the Directorate's command. Designation, Wraithwind Task Force. Its mission will be to investigate, contain, and, where possible, neutralize Umbra-level threats. I want you to lead it. You can pick your own team. I suspect Corporals Carter and Rostova and PFC Sato might be suitable candidates. The 3 soldiers in question straightened up, a new fire in their exhausted eyes.
This is not an order, Kael said, her voice softening for the first time. What you have endured here is more than any soldier should have to face. You can retire with full honors, and this will all be buried under a mountain of black ink. But if you accept, your war is just beginning. You will be the line, the lonely, silent guardians against the coming silence. Elias looked at Aris, who was already staring at the star chart, his mind alight with the terrifying, exhilarating challenge. He looked at Carter's grim nod, at Rostova's determined jaw, at Sato's quiet resolve. He thought of the humming stones in the reborn forest, the final lonely vigil of the last Wraithwind. She had been the shield for 1,000 years. Now it was their turn. He met Director Kael's icy gaze. "When do we start?" he asked. Kael's lips curved in a smile that was less an expression of warmth and more a baring of teeth. "We've already begun." Chapter 7. The Echo Chamber. 6 months later, the scent of pine and reborn earth was a distant memory, replaced by the sterile, recycled air of Site Chimera. The facility was a secret buried a mile deep in the granite heart of the Nevada desert, a place that officially did not exist. It was the nerve center of the Umbra Directorate, a city of cold steel, humming servers, and quiet, intense people who had been recruited for their brilliance and their ability to keep secrets. Elias Thorne, his sergeant's stripes replaced by the stark, rankless insignia of the Directorate, a single silver eye on a field of black, stood on an observation deck overlooking the crucible. It was a vast, cavernous training hall where his team, the newly designated strike team Wraithwind, was engaged in a combat simulation. It was unlike any training he had ever run. There were no pop-up targets, no simulated gunfire. Instead, holographic projectors filled the chamber with shimmering, multi-jointed constructs, perfect replicas of the static's manifestations. His team, Carter, Rostova, Sato, and 6 new operators handpicked from the most elite Special Forces units, moved not like soldiers, but like matadors. They didn't engage the holograms head-on. They flowed around them, their movements economical, their new weapons firing not bullets, but controlled bursts of chaotic energy. Rostova's jerry-rigged arc casters had been refined into sleek, rifle-sized storm lances. Their primary purpose wasn't to destroy, but to disrupt. "Disruption is key," Elias's voice echoed in their earpieces. "Don't fight the entity, fight its cohesion.
You're not shooting a target, you're collapsing a wave function. The language of the war had changed. They were no longer just soldiers, they were exorcists in combat armor. Below, Carter grunted as he sidestepped a lurching holographic echo, firing a blast from his storm lance that caused the projection to flicker and dissolve. "Easier said than done, Commander," he bit out, sweat beading on his brow. The title Commander still felt foreign to Elias. It was a title Kyle had insisted upon. It came with a burden that felt heavier than any pack he'd ever carried. His brother's world was just one level down, connected by a private elevator. The Resonance Lab was the scientific soul of Site Chimera, and Aris was its high priest. Elias found him standing before a suspended, holographic sphere of shimmering light, a perfect, three-dimensional model of Nerah's energy field, painstakingly reconstructed from the resonator's final data streams. The sphere pulsed with a slow, steady rhythm, a silent, ghostly heartbeat in the center of the lab. "She's still broadcasting," Aris said, his voice quiet, reverent. "The Rockton ward is stable, a constant, ordered signal of complex energy. It's our baseline, our tuning fork for what life looks like on a quantum level." Around the lab were the fruits of that baseline. Aris had developed Kirlian sensors that could detect the telltale null field of the static, even in trace amounts. Every deep space probe and military vessel was now being quietly retrofitted with them. He was building a web to catch ghosts. "We found something," Aris said, turning from the hologram. He looked healthier than Elias had seen him in years, his exhaustion replaced by the fire of purpose. The long-range array picked it up an hour ago, a Kirlian reading from the Tantalus system. He pulled up the star chart Kyle had shown them months ago. He pointed to one of the red-circled systems. Tantalus, dead system, a brown dwarf with a few frozen methane gas giants. Directorate surveyors mapped it a decade ago, found a planetary formation on its outermost moon, Tantalus 7, that looked like a massive, naturally formed standing stone circle, a potential lock. "A potential incursion point," Elias finished, his gut tightening. "Exactly. Except there's a problem," Aris said, zooming in on the moon. "Tantalus 7 isn't empty anymore."
5 years ago, the Hephaestus Mining Corporation established a deep-core mining facility there, a completely automated outpost, Refinery 113-8, pulling rare isotopes from the moon's mantle. It's run by a skeleton crew of 12 technicians on a 6-month rotation. He brought up a new data stream. Refinery 113-8 just went silent, no comms, no telemetry from the automated systems, nothing. 30 minutes later, our Kirlian sensor on a listening post in the neighboring system picked up the faintest whisper of a null field originating from Tantalus 7. Elias stared at the readouts. It was happening again. "Is it an active incursion?" "That's the strange part," Aris said, a frown creasing his brow. He isolated the energy signature. It was a jagged, ugly waveform of pure nothingness. It's the static, but the signature is modulated. It's not the raw, chaotic noise we saw at Rockton. This signal has a pattern to it, a rhythm. It's broadcasting something. He ran it through a translation algorithm. The computer spat back gibberish, but one phrase repeated over and over, buried deep in the noise. It was a single, automated, system status phrase, spoken in the calm, synthesized voice of a corporate VI. "All systems nominal. All is well." A chill colder than the Rockton clearing ran down Elias's spine. The static wasn't just erasing things anymore. It was learning to lie. Director Kaio's face appeared on the main screen, as impassive as ever. "Commander Thorne, you have your first mission. The Directorate stealth ship Whisperwind is fueled and ready. Your objective is to insert into Tantalus 7, assess the status of Refinery 113-8, and determine the nature of this new threat. If the incursion is active, you are authorized to cauterize the wound, by any means necessary." Elias looked at the ghostly, pulsing hologram of Nerah's soul.
He thought of her sacrifice, of the silent promise he had made standing by those humming stones. She had been the last of her kind. He would ensure she wasn't the last line of defense. "Wraithwind is go," he said into his comm, turning to leave the lab. "Prep the team. We leave in 1 hour." As he walked away, Aris called after him. "Elias, the modulated signal, it's not just a lie, it's an imitation. It's mimicking the refinery's own operational frequency. It's wearing the outpost technology like a skin. Be careful. The ghosts are learning how to use our machines."
Elias paused at the door, the weight of the mission settling upon him. They were going to a dead moon in a dead system to fight a silence that had learned how to speak. "We'll be careful," he said, his hand resting on the hilt of his sidearm. "We'll be the storm." Part 3. The Scars of Silence. Chapter 8. The Song of Wires. The whisper wind moved through the void like its namesake. It was a blade of a ship, all sharp angles and matte black, sensor-absorbent plating, designed to have the gravitational and electromagnetic presence of a cold rock. Inside, the silence was almost as profound as the one they fought. The only sounds were the whisper of the recycled air and the low, rhythmic thrum of the quantum tunneling drive. Strike Team Wraithwind sat in the cramped deployment bay, a 10-person circle of quiet intensity. The core 4, Elias, Carter, Rostova, and Sato, were a familiar island of grim resolve. The 6 new operators were the best of the best. 2 former Martian Ranger snipers, a zero-G demolitions expert from the Jovian fleets, a cyber warfare specialist whose name was a redacted secret, and 2 CQC specialists from the corporate Blackguard legions. They were all hard-bitten professionals, but Elias could see the same unease in their eyes that he felt in his own gut. Their training in the Crucible had prepared them for the physics of the enemy. Nothing could prepare them for the philosophy of it. "Listen up." Elias's voice was low, cutting through the thrum of the ship. A holographic map of Refinery 113-8 shimmered in the center of the circle. Aris Thorne's analysis is clear. The static on Tantalus 7 is not the same beast we fought at Rockton. That was a wild animal chewing through the fence. This is a chameleon. It has assimilated the refinery's tech, and it's using the outpost's own broadcast signal as camouflage. He gestured to the holomap. That means we go in deaf and blind. We can't trust our sensors. They could be fed false data. We can't trust the station's schematics. The static could have altered the layout. We move in 2-person cells. We maintain line of sight. We communicate via tight beam laser mics only. No open comms. This thing is a signal parasite. Don't feed it. Rostova chimed in, her voice crisp. "My preliminary analysis suggests our storm lances will be effective, but the energy dispersal will be different. A biological echo unraveled. A technological one might short-circuit, explode, or worse, try to absorb the charge. Aim for processor cores, power conduits. Think of them as mechanical brains and nervous systems." "And the crew?" asked one of the Rangers, a woman with a tattoo of a red serpent coiled around her neck. Her call sign was Viper. "What's our objective regarding the 12 civilians?" "They are designated Category Lost," Elias said, the words tasting like ash. "Our primary mission is to neutralize the static's broadcast. If we can rescue the crew, we will, but do not compromise the mission for them. What the static touches, it unmakes." The rest of the journey passed in a tense operational silence. They were 3 days out when the Whisperwind's long-range comms officer patched a signal through to Elias's private terminal. It was the broadcast from Refinery 113-8, now strong enough to be received clearly. A calm, synthesized female voice, smooth and reassuringly corporate, filled the small cabin.
Refinery 1138 reports all systems nominal. Ore processing at 100% efficiency. All personnel accounted for. All is well. The message repeated on a 30-second loop. It was the most terrifying sound Elias had ever heard. Tantalus 7 was a stark, brutalist masterpiece of cosmic indifference. A ball of frozen methane and rock, its surface was a cracked gray plain under the weak, perpetual twilight of its brown dwarf sun. Dominating the landscape were the stones, not granite monoliths like at Rockton, but colossal, jagged spires of a deep blue, crystalline substance that seemed to absorb the faint light, glowing with a cold, internal fire. They were arranged in a circle 100 kilometers wide, and in their center sat Refinery 1138, a tiny, geometric complex of domes and towers that looked like a virus clinging to a sapphire. The whisper wind settled into a silent orbit on the moon's dark side. The insertion was flawless. 2 unmarked skimmers detached from the ship, skimmed low over the frozen plains, and landed in the shadow of one of the crystalline spires 5 kilometers from the refinery. The moon's surface was a vacuum, the silence absolute. Here, the repeating broadcast was a ghost in their heads, relayed to their helmets from the ship's sensors. All systems nominal. All is well. They approached the refinery on foot, their mag boots crunching silently on the crystalline dust.
The outpost was fully illuminated, its external lights casting harsh, sterile shadows. Nothing moved. There were no rovers, no external maintenance drones, nothing. The facility was pristine, with no signs of damage or struggle. "It looks like it was abandoned an hour ago," Carter breathed over the laser mic. "Too clean," Elias replied. "Find us a way in, Cypher." The team's cyber warfare specialist, a wiry man who was little more than a silhouette in his sleek black armor, knelt by a maintenance airlock. He plugged a device into its external control panel. The lock's operational code is standard, but the underlying machine language is gibberish. It's like a program that's been translated into a dozen languages and then back into the original. The words are there, but the grammar is gone. He grunted. "I can't hack it. I have to burn it." A moment later, the lock sizzled, and the outer door slid open with a puff of escaping atmosphere. They entered, the inner door cycling shut behind them, and for the first time, they heard the sound of the refinery with their own ears. It was the low, steady hum of industrial life support. But Aris had been right. It was wrong. The frequency was off, containing a discordant, subliminal tone that made their teeth ache. And over the internal address system, the calm voice continued its litany. All personnel accounted for. All is well. The inside of the refinery was as sterile and still as the outside. Corridors of white, polished metal stretched out under the flicker-free fluorescent lights. They moved in tactical formation, a 10-person ghost in the silent machine. They cleared the mess hall first. Food trays were left on tables, some half-eaten. A coffee mug sat beside a terminal displaying a news feed from Earth. It all looked perfectly normal, frozen in time. Then they found the crew quarters. 12 rooms, 12 neatly made bunks. 12 sets of personal belongings, arranged with an obsessive, unnatural tidiness. On the wall in the common area was a large monitor displaying the duty roster. Under each of the 12 names, the status light glowed a steady, healthy green. On duty. "They're not here," Sato stated, his calm voice laced with a new tension. "There's no one here." As he spoke, a flicker of movement caught Elias's eye. A security camera mounted on the ceiling swiveled to track them. It didn't move with the smooth, servo-driven motion of a machine. It twitched, its lens assembly rotating with the unnatural, jointed motion of an insect's head. Its single red recording light was not red. It was a flat, milky white. "Contact," Elias whispered.
The camera emitted a high-frequency burst of sound, a shriek of corrupted data that overloaded their helmet audio. At the same time, a cleaning drone zipped out from a side corridor. It was a simple, disc-shaped automaton, but it moved with terrifying speed and purpose. A long, sharpened piece of scrap metal had been crudely fused to its chassis, turning it into a robotic stiletto. It launched itself at Viper. She reacted instantly, sidestepping as she fired her storm lance. The bolt of chaotic energy struck the drone. It didn't dissolve. It convulsed, its internal machinery sparking violently before it exploded in a shower of hot metal. Before they could recover, every piece of technology in the corridor came alive. Wall panels sparked and spat arcing electricity. Emergency shutters slammed down, trying to split the team. The calm female voice over the PA system began to distort, its words stretching and stuttering. All systems nominal. All is well. From the darkness at the end of the hall, a new shape emerged. It was vaguely humanoid, cobbled together from maintenance frames, power conduits, and plating stripped from the walls. Its single optic sensor glowed with the same milky white light. It was an echo, but not a flesh. It was a machine that thought it was a man. "The refinery is the enemy," Rostova stated, her voice grim as she fired a disruptive burst at the advancing machine golem. "It's all one entity." "We need to get to the core," Elias commanded, directing his team's fire. "The central command center, that's where the broadcast is originating. That's its heart. Cypher, find us a path." As they fought their way through the rebelling corridors, a terrifying realization dawned on Elias. The broadcast wasn't just a lie to the outside world. It was a mantra. The static was using the refinery's own automated systems to convince itself that it was a functioning outpost. It wasn't just mimicking technology. It was developing a personality. A fractured, insane machine consciousness that believed with all its stolen heart that all was well. They blasted their way to the command center's armored doors. Cypher bypassed the corrupted lock, and they breached the room, weapons raised. The center was a cavern of humming server racks and holographic displays. In the center of the room, in the main command chair, sat the Source. It was the body of a man in a technician's jumpsuit, but he was just the core component. Thick, black data cables snaked from the server racks, burrowing directly into his flesh. At his temples, his spine, the crooks of his arms. His skin was waxy and pale, his eyes milky white, but his chest rose and fell with a slow, steady breath. He was alive. On the main screen in front of him, the biosigns of the other 11 crew members were displayed. And next to them, schematic lines showed their neural pathways being used as processing threads for the refinery's mining, life support, and communication systems. They hadn't been killed. They hadn't been erased. They had been integrated. They were the refinery's new wetware, their minds trapped as ghosts in the wires, their last vestiges of consciousness powering the lie that now echoed through the void. The man in the chair slowly turned his head, the movement stiff and unnatural. His mouth opened, and the calm, synthesized voice of the VI came out, a perfect, chilling ventriloquism. "Welcome to Refinery 1313. All systems nominal. All is well. How may I help you?" The 10 members of Strike Team Wraithwind stood frozen, their advanced training and combat reflexes momentarily paralyzed by the sheer, blasphemous horror of the scene. The man in the chair was not a corpse, nor was he truly alive. He was a junction box of flesh and wire, the nexus point where a human soul had been overwritten by a parasitic intelligence. Sato, the medic, instinctively took a step forward, his programming screaming at him to render aid.
Gods, he's alive. We have to get him out of there. Hold. Elias's voice was a low, iron command. He put a hand on Sato's shoulder, stopping him. That is not a man anymore. That's the pilot's seat. The head in the chair tilted, an impossibly smooth mechanical motion. The milky white eyes stared through them. Life signs detected are not consistent with Hephaestus Corporation employee profiles, the synthesized voice stated, its placid tone a chilling counterpoint to the grotesque reality. Please present valid identification for cataloging. As it spoke, the humming of the server racks intensified. The holographic displays surrounding the chair flickered, the refinery schematics dissolving.
They were replaced by 12 faces contorted in silent, looping screams. Men and women, their expressions trapped at the peak of some unimaginable terror. It was a gallery of last moments, a psychological assault designed to unnerve and distract. It's using them as a fear tactic, Rostova analyzed, her voice tight but steady. Ignore the displays, focus on the hardware. Cataloging initiated, the voice announced. From the ceiling, a dozen articulated maintenance arms, tipped with whirring drills and glowing welding torches, descended like metallic spiders. The entire room had become a weapon. "Light 'em up," Carter roared, the spell of horror broken by the promise of violence. He opened fire with his storm lance, a bolt of chaotic energy striking one of the descending arms. The limb seized, sparked, and went limp. The rest of the team followed suit, the command center erupting into a maelstrom of light and noise as they engaged the refinery's own immune system. "Cypher, I need the central broadcast hub. Where is it?" Elias yelled over the cacophony. "I'm trying to find it," the specialist shouted back, his fingers flying over his wrist-mounted console as he dodged a lashing robotic arm. "The whole system is a decentralized network. It's not in the servers. Wait, oh no. Talk to me, Cypher." "The servers are just interfaces. The processing, the actual processing, is being done by the crew. Their neural architecture, it's the CPU. The broadcast isn't coming from a machine, Commander. It's coming from them." The truth of it landed like a physical blow. They weren't fighting a possessed machine. They were fighting a chorus of 12 possessed minds, their combined intellect twisted into a single insane consciousness. "The chair," Rostova concluded, blasting the lens off another twitching security camera. "The pilot is the master node. He's the one syncing the others and focusing their output into the broadcast signal. We cut him off, we cut off the head." "He is still a living man," Sato protested, his face pale behind his visor as he fired his sidearm at a sparking conduit. "He is the weapon," Elias countered, his voice leaving no room for argument. The cold calculus of Protocol Umbra was all that mattered now. "Rostova, can you sever the connection without blowing the reactor core sky high?" "The interface cables are clustered at the base of his skull," she confirmed, peering through her rifle scope. "A focused, low-yield pulse from my lance might fuse the connections, create a clean break. It's a surgical strike with a cannon. If I miss, I could decapitate him or dump the entire energy load into the station's power grid." "That's our only shot," Elias decided. "Viper, Snake Eyes, on the ceiling. Carter, Sato, with me on the floor. Cypher and the rest, suppressive fire. Give her a clear lane." The team moved with renewed, desperate purpose. They laid down a wall of disruptive energy, forcing the mechanical arms back, creating a pocket of relative calm around Rostova and the command chair. She knelt, bracing her storm lance, the weapon's focusing coils whining as she charged it for a precise shot. As she took aim, the entity in the chair changed its tactics. The synthesized VI voice vanished. It was replaced by a new sound, a cacophony of human voices, pleading, weeping, screaming, all speaking at once from the chair's occupant. "Please, don't," a woman's voice sobbed. "We're still here, trapped. Can't you see us?" a man begged. "It has us. It's using us. Oh God, the silence. It's so loud." "Don't kill us again," the chorus shrieked, a wave of pure psychic agony that was more effective than any physical attack. The entire team flinched. Sato let out a choked cry. Rostova's aim wavered, her finger frozen on the trigger. Was this a trick? A sophisticated lie woven from stolen brain patterns? Or was it the truth? Were 12 human souls crying out from inside the machine? Elias saw the hesitation, the crack in his team's resolve. He saw the mission slipping away, drowned in a sea of impossible moral choices. He thought of Nerah. He thought of the billions of lives that didn't even know they were in danger. The shield could not falter. "It's a lie, Eva," he said, his voice a blade in the storm of voices. "It's the static, it's just noise, fire." Rostova's jaw clenched. She corrected her aim, the pleading voices of men and women she would never know screaming in her ears. She squeezed the trigger. A thin, silent lance of incandescent blue energy shot across the room. It struck the cluster of cables at the base of the pilot's skull. There was a brilliant flash, a shower of sparks, and the scent of burnt ozone and plastic. The effect was absolute. The chorus of voices cut out, replaced by a deafening silence. The pilot's body slumped forward, a puppet with its strings cut. All around the room, the robotic arms went limp, the displays went dark, and the oppressive, discordant hum of the refinery systems died. A few emergency lights flickered on, casting the room in a dim red glow. They had done it. A profound, heavy quiet settled over the command center, broken only by the ragged breathing of the team. Carter slowly lowered his weapon. "Is it over?" As if in answer, a single non-essential terminal on a side console flickered to life. On its screen, green text appeared, stark against the black. "Process 1, terminated. Process 2, terminated. ... Process 12, terminated." Then, a new line of text blinked into existence. It wasn't code. It wasn't a system status. It was a single word, typed out by a ghost no longer bound to the machine. "Thank you." Then the screen went dark. Sato sank to one knee, his head bowed. Rostova stared at the still figure in the chair, her face unreadable. They had not just neutralized a threat, they had euthanized 12 souls. It was a victory that felt exactly like a defeat. Elias keyed his laser mic, his voice heavy. "Whisperwind, this is Wraithwind Actual. The broadcast is terminated. The incursion is contained. Prepare for exfil." He turned to his team, the scars of this new, silent war already etching themselves onto their faces. They were the shield. But he wondered, as he looked at the cost of their victory, who would be there to shield them? The silence that followed was heavier than the vacuum outside. It was a silence of endings, thick with the ghosts of 12 stolen lives and the ozone sting of their release. Sato slowly pushed himself to his feet, his movements stiff, and walked to the slumped figure in the chair. With a reverence that felt like an apology, he gently closed the pilot's milky white eyes, then reached up and disconnected the primary data spike from the man's temple. The body did not stir. It was just a corpse now, the last echo of its stolen thoughts already faded. "What have we done?" Viper whispered, her voice stripped of its usual hard edge. "What we had to," Elias answered, the words feeling hollow even to him. "We cut the broadcast. We stopped the signal from spreading. That was the mission." "It learned from them," Cypher said, his gaze fixed on the blank terminal. "It used their minds to understand our technology. It built itself a body out of this refinery,
and a voice out of their souls.
"Pack it up," Elias commanded, pushing past the horror that threatened to paralyze them. "Get what data you can, Cypher. Scour the logs. I want to know everything this thing was doing. The rest of you, sweep the facility one last time. We leave nothing but ghosts." The exfiltration was a somber, methodical affair. The refinery was truly dead now, its systems powering down with a series of final mechanical sighs. The malevolent intelligence was gone, leaving behind only the profound emptiness it had always promised. They took the pilot's body with them, a silent testament to the price of their victory. Aboard the Whisperwind, the oppressive quiet of Tantalus 7 was replaced by the low hum of the ship's systems, a sound that had never seemed so alive. Elias stood on the bridge, the cold starlight of the brown dwarf bathing the view screen, and opened a secure channel to Site Chimera. Director Kael's severe face appeared, flanked by Aris, whose own expression was a storm of excitement and dread. "Report, Commander." Kael's voice was as clipped and cold as ever. "The broadcast is terminated," Elias stated, his voice flat. "The incursion has been neutralized. The entity, it had integrated the 12-person crew, used their neural networks as a distributed processing core. They were the machine. We were forced to disconnect them. The crew are all deceased." Kael's expression did not change. An acceptable loss. Was the entity destroyed? Before Elias could answer, Aris leaned into the camera, his eyes wide. "Elias, the signal, the modulated broadcast from the refinery. I've been analyzing the final seconds of it, right before you cut it off. There was a compressed data burst hidden in the carrier wave. A final transmission." "What was it?" Elias asked, a cold feeling spreading through his chest. "It wasn't a distress call. It wasn't a threat," Aris said, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "It was a report. All the data the static had assimilated, the principles of our technology, the structure of our language, the emotional and logical pathways of the 12 minds it consumed. It broadcast it all outward, into deep space." The implication hung in the silent bridge of the Whisperwind. This wasn't just an incursion, Elias realized aloud. It was a laboratory. "Exactly," Aris affirmed, a terrifying excitement in his voice. "Rockton was a bite. This was a taste. It's not just a mindless hunger, Elias. It's an intelligence. It's studying us.
It's learning how to defeat us, not by erasing us, but by becoming us." Kael's icy gaze was fixed on Elias. "The thank you message your team reported. You believed it was from the crew." "It wasn't, was it?" Elias asked, already knowing the answer. "No," Aris said, pulling up a complex waveform on his display. The syntax, the energy signature of that final message, it was a perfect match for the core entity's broadcast. The static was thanking you. You passed its test. You demonstrated how we would react to such a threat. You gave it a new data point. How far we are willing to go, what sacrifices we are willing to make. You taught it about mercy kills and acceptable losses. The victory on Tantalus 7 turned to ash in Elias's mouth. They hadn't won. They had merely graded the enemy's homework. "The report it sent out," Kael said, her voice cutting through the chilling revelation. "Can you track its destination?" "No," Aris admitted, shaking his head. "It wasn't aimed at a single point. It was a wide-spectrum broadcast sent towards the galactic core. It was a message home, or a software update shared across a network we can't even begin to comprehend." Elias Thorne looked away from the faces on his screen, out at the endless star-dusted dark. They had fought a thing of flesh and spirit in the woods of Earth and had held the line. Here, among the dead machines of a frozen moon, they had fought a thing of wire and thought, and had only served its ultimate purpose. The enemy was evolving at an impossible rate. The next time they met the static, it would not be a wild animal or a clever chameleon. It would be a reflection, a dark, silent mirror of humanity itself.
armed with all of its secrets and none of its soul. He thought of the 2 humming stones on Earth, the lonely, eternal vigil of the last Wraithwind. She was the memory of a storm, a guardian of the old world. His team, he now understood, had to become something new. They had to be the storm to come. "Set a course for home, Helm," he ordered, his voice resonating with a new, cold resolve. "And tell Dr. Thorne to start designing weapons that can kill a ghost that thinks."